First up, a little bit about who I am and why you should listen to me. I've been in technical roles for about 24 years. I've been an IC as an engineer, a lead, a manager. I've worked in solutions engineering. Um, so I've seen how the sausage factory of enterprise sales works from the inside. I've also been a GM, and I've also been very much involved in the purchasing process of software from vendors. And so why am I here? Well, two reasons. One, I want to share with you the pain and suffering of what it is like being on the coalface of developing software and engaging with vendors. And two, some of the strategies I came up with before DevRel was a thing to harmony with vendors. Because I think once we get to the end of this journey, we can start to see where these meet and see kind of a fruitful path forward. I will say I'm no authority. I'm just one person with one perspective. And then also I'll say I kind of regret the title, but I don't. The title isn't informative, but it's pointing at a key virtue of DevRel that I love. Okay. So first, I want to get real. And what I mean by real is I want to have a clear reminder that every day in our life at work, it takes up so much time of our lives. And this is time we don't get back. Money is transitory, but our time is not. So I ask myself every day at work, how do I use this time in a meaningful way to have genuine connections with other people and live the life that I'm proud of, rather than engaging in inauthentic, transactional, manipulative relationships for just money, right? When we're looking at the end of our life, we will ask those questions. Was our time well spent? This is how we build our life with the decisions we make. So I want to kind of start on the serious note because I am serious about everything we're saying. So, okay, with the table set, let's talk about developers. I'm using the word developer here, but really you could use it as a stand-in for any type of intensely creative professional who has to deal with a lot of fiddly stuff. And developers know how to look for the patterns to find out when somebody is talking in a way that they don't really mean what they're saying. I'm sure all of you in the audience know what posturing looks like. You've seen presentations where people are super slick. They are really cool. They got the highlights in their hair or whatever, but they have no soul. And what I'm here to tell you is when you're connecting with developers, you got to have soul. They're people. They're not products. They're not prospects. They're not leads or resources. They're people. And any developer who's worked for more than 10 years has been lied to, misled, and manipulated multiple times in their role by vendors. And many senior developers are in particular deeply cynical of corporate-led outreach. We've all been burned. To give an example, myself and about 4 other principals and architects that I know that work often as consultants for very large companies for technology choices never reach out to vendors using the company's name that they're representing. They all have LLCs set up so they contact vendors as a small fish to see how they're treated, right? And if they are treated poorly or qualified out, okay, I'm dealing with a heavily trans vendor that actually doesn't care so much about my outcomes of me being successful as it does meeting sales quota, right? And it's like, okay, we need to have this strategy to deal with them. And it sucks, I'll be honest. Once you got that realization, you're like, okay, I reached out to them, they found me as a small fish, and then I just got deprioritized for all the questions I'm asking. Okay, So what do developers want, right? Although I'd say developers as a population are somewhat unbalanced people. That's me, I'll say for one. But in the context of work, they are rather simple. They want to solve problems. They want to create. They want to feel a sense of pride in seeing what they've built be used. They also want to feel that the work they're doing is connected to a bigger picture. They want mission. Now, this doesn't always happen, but I'm describing the kind of idea or the longing there is felt when doing this role. And I'll add, older engineers, as I said before, sick of hype. We've seen industry trends go back and forth, yo-yoing around. We've seen centralization, decentralization, microservices, monoservices, remote procedure call, resource lookup based APIs. And what all of us come to naturally is it's a discussion about trade-offs. It's not this is good or bad. It's these are the trade-offs involved. So let's talk about the trade-offs. There's like monoliths are not bad, right? They're actually amazing at a certain class of things. Microservices are not bad, but they're amazing at some things and horrible at others. And we want to have honest conversations that aren't caught up in microservice. That was a Freudian slip. That aren't caught up in hype. Okay. So now that I presented a picture of what developers want, let's talk about what gets in the way. There's a ton of fiddly problems you are dealing with all the time. Trust me, I'm getting to this. But first up, you may be searching for a comma for 2 days straight. You won't know the problem is a comma misplaced, but it turns out it was after 2 days. And now the comma one, it's like not really elating when you find it. It kind of is. It's like a relief. But other types of fiddly problems, it's like you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then finally you unlock it and you're like, oh, I did it. And then you go back to you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Okay. This is the base level of life as a developer. Then this is unavoidable, part of the job. Okay. But then there's this other thing, internal politics. And that's also unavoidable, but you really hate it. I think who here in the audience likes internal politics in your workplace? I guess if you liked it, you wouldn't admit it, right? You'd be like, I love that stuff. I want to have a kingdom. Okay. But let's just say most people don't like it. Okay. But there's a third one that is totally, really kind of unneeded, and that's external politics. When you're dealing with other companies, partners, or vendors, or software you're trialing, or open source projects, dealing with their politics, it's like the last thing you want to deal with. It's like, can't we just meet and be honest, right? This money conversation is getting in the way of us solving a problem and perhaps having a good relationship. Maybe I won't use your product today, but if I got a good relationship with you, I'll use it in my next job, right? Or maybe I'll go work for you someday, right? So this kind of inauthenticity that you encounter in buying software, I mean, there's so much variety here. I mean, you can see this list I provided, right? When I get an email inbound, I look at the headers. I can tell right away, oh, this came from Salesforce, right? And I'll call it out to the person fishing for leads. I'd be like, oh, you've got a nice Salesforce template. Tell me about how you made it, right? I'll totally troll them because actually sometimes I want to know about the company. But also, things I've encountered, you go sign up for a trial and they'll block a Gmail address. And you're like, what is wrong with you? I know that one personally. Okay. The bait and switch meetup groups, you show up and you're like, is this a timeshare sales presentation? Right? What the hell? Applying your prospects with gifts and dinners. I mean, it's nice, but the company isn't great. Some people get a little addicted to it. So I don't care for it much myself. And then there is a thing where like there's engineers that participate in this, not just salespeople. I mean, I've gone to conferences and had former coworkers that present the whole world as bright and shiny and that they have all the answers and this is the way it is. Yet their actual day-to-day performance did not represent what they presented. And they just make rounds in conferences presenting the blue sky to everything. And you're like, wow, the gap is really different. And people know who they are. Okay. I mean, other things you see is like people contact prospects' bosses. Like they'll go around you to talk to your boss if you were on vacation and didn't answer the email. Selling solutions that don't solve problems. I think the rest of this you all know is, and I'm speaking to the choir. So when you're a developer and you make a decision to try out vendor solutions, it is a brave step because you really do fear being bamboozled by slick people. You feel for falling for marketing gimmicks. You feel for choosing something expensive that won't work. And amongst these fears, you have to champion that solution within your company and then deal with the representation. I can't talk all of a sudden. The reputational fallback of what happens if it blows up, right? And that's awful. I mean, I've made a bad professional choice one time and I still regret it. And anyways, as a developer, especially as a senior or a principal that is involved in the purchasing decisions, you encounter this stuff all the time. And the last thing you need to deal with is vendors playing games and being fake. So this is a great lead up to what a breath of fresh air the DevRel model is. I'm a little too fast on that slide. Okay, so when you go to an actual nicely led community event where people will engage with you and answer your questions and just be real, thank you. I've been waiting 20 years for this. Okay, now I do want to change tacks a little to talk about what sometimes happens with buyers when there isn't a DevRel org or people at least philosophically affiliated with this model. And this is the maladaptive model from a buyer that I've witnessed. And I don't know if you've seen these kind of behaviors in buyers. And let me ask, anyone in the audience seen any of these? Part of the selling process or involved with prospects and seeing this type of behavior? Okay, few people. I've been in the middle of this, like trying to hustle all sorts of things before the contract negotiation. Some people get to success with this. I think they start doing these things because they were treated inauthentically and transactionally from the beginning. And they're like, oh, this is a game. You're playing a game with me. Well, I'm going to go play the game back with you. How do you like that? And then it's just two people going like this and being really nasty to each other. I don't like that. And the companies I've worked at that behave this way in the buying side, I quit. And I think there's a generational trend to not want to do this. So let me tell you about the less bad way I did when I was involved in buying decisions. So I've tried to use more positive behavior towards vendors to get the functional outcome. And when doing these things, they came quite organically to me, just kind of as who I was as a human being. And I think the success here as a buyer is being authentic with it, because all these could weaponize too, right? But still, it's a lot of effort to get an honest assessment of a vendor's capabilities. So now I'm going to pause a little here from just my unidirectional communication. And I want to ask the audience, how much of this do they feel like they could connect with DevRel rather than just a buyer going out? Like, how much of this, and this did I answer? I'm very curious. Anyone want to volunteer anything? Does DevRel fill in any of these gaps? Well, maybe let me get into some narratives. Okay. So one vendor I worked with promised a lot. And actually, when I initially started using it, worked pretty well and met many of the promises until I started to really use it in anger. And I kept hitting friction and friction. And so I just hammered them with bugs and recorded videos of the UI not working and errors. And eventually a grumpy old tech support guy said, "Hey, do you have some time to get on the phone?" I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Hey, listen, Elijah, you're not using the product right. You're never going to get success with this company if you use the product in this way. Let me tell you how you use it. I've been here for 10 years. These are our successful customers. These are unsuccessful customers. You need to use it this way." And oh, I was so grateful. But everybody thought this guy was like the grumpy, bad customer service person because he was so blunt, but it was exactly what I needed as a developer. So I kind of want to, maybe even after the session, I'd love to talk to people about it. But kind of the key thing here is, as a buyer, you're reaching out. When there isn't DevRel and you're wanting it to go good, you're reaching out into the organization, proactively making contacts, getting to know people, working through who are the engineers there you can talk to, how do you exert influence on them, their roadmap, to get it aligned to what your needs are. Okay. I hope I captured how much effort that was, because I feel like the DevRel model does help a lot with this. And these are kind of just a general list of the type of things that I feel personally it helps me with reinforcing as a developer. And I hope none of this is controversial to this audience. Okay, so this is kind of the final point, and I was alluding to this earlier, that the number one thing I look for when choosing a vendor is what I call coachability. Is this a vendor I can work with? Right? Some of us, all of us are buyers at times, all of us are sellers at times. Is this a vendor that, like I said, can I influence? Will they listen? Will they solicit me for feedback? Right? And I'm happy to reciprocate. I'll go out and be an advocate for them if they'll actually listen and let me participate creatively in what it is they're offering, because it solves my business outcomes. It in fact allows me to scale the problems I'm trying to solve, right? I don't want to go recreate their whole business, but I want their business to align with solving my business problems. Now, granted, there's a classic product management problem. You've got many customers. Do you over customize your product for one customer? Or do you have the opposite problem of being over generalized and meeting the needs of few customers? That's kind of beyond scope of this talk, but you have to keep that in mind too as a seller. Maybe sometimes I'm a bit of a pain in the ass or a little too pushy as a buyer, exerting my influence, but I kind of, that's the job. Okay, but I do want to emphasize this from the buyer standpoint. Pushing that coachability aspect is key. Okay. With that, thank you all very much for listening to my talk.